Have you ever noticed how the more you try to explain your pain, the more they seem to feed off it? You pour your heart out, hoping for just a single ounce of genuine empathy, but instead, you are met with coldness, deflection, or a sudden reversal where suddenly you are the one apologizing. This is the hidden trap of trying to heal someone who actively consumes your energy. You knew something was profoundly wrong when the argument started going in circles. You would spend hours agonizing over the perfect words, thinking that if you just communicated clearly enough, they would finally understand your perspective. But the misunderstanding was never an accident. It was a strategy designed to keep you emotionally exhausted and constantly doubting yourself. Nobody talks about this, but the exhaustion you feel is not just physical tiredness. It is the deep, soul-crushing fatigue of constantly defending your reality against someone committed to rewriting it. You were not crazy. You were not being too sensitive. You were experiencing the psychological whiplash of someone who desperately needed your emotional reaction to feel powerful. Every time you tried to set a boundary, they twisted it into a personal attack against them. You thought you were asking for basic respect, but they treated your completely normal requests like an unbearable insult. This is the moment you realized that your pain was entirely invisible to them, unless they could somehow use it to play the victim and make you feel guilty again. Your intuition was screaming at you the entire time, trying to protect you from the invisible damage. You felt it in the pit of your stomach whenever the phone rang or when you heard their footsteps approaching the door. That heavy, suffocating anxiety was your body recognizing that you were not in a safe relationship. You were standing directly in the middle of a war zone. What most people never realize is that your endless compassion was the exact fuel they were using against you. They did not target you because you were weak or broken. They targeted you because you possessed a deep capacity to love, forgive, and care for others. They needed your empathy because they are completely entirely empty inside, lacking the ability to generate their own. You gave them chance after chance, holding on to the brief moments when they pretended to be the person you first met. You convinced yourself that if you just loved them harder or forgave them one more time, the mask would stay on forever. But those fleeting moments of kindness were never a sign of real change. They were just calculated breadcrumbs designed to keep you starving. It felt like you were losing your mind, piecing together a puzzle where the shapes kept changing every single day. One moment you were the most important person in their entire universe, and the next, you were completely discarded, treated like an annoying burden. That constant push and pull was intentionally designed to make you addicted to the terrifying cycle of their abuse. You were fighting a battle that was rigged from the very beginning, pouring your sacred energy into a bottomless void. You tried to build a beautiful life with someone who was secretly dismantling your foundation brick by brick. Every tear you cried and every compromise you made was quietly documented and used as evidence of your weakness, rather than proof of your incredible devotion. This is where the truth finally begins to break through the heavy fog of their manipulation. You are not responsible for fixing a person who actively enjoys breaking you down. The deep ache in your chest is simply the painful realization that the relationship you fought so hard to save was an illusion. And recognizing this terrifying illusion is your very first step toward true healing. Here is what was really happening behind closed doors when you thought you were simply trying to fix a misunderstanding. Every emotional reaction you provided, whether it was profound sadness, intense frustration, or desperate anger, served as their absolute lifeline. They did not want a peaceful resolution. They wanted your emotional chaos because your chaos proved they existed. You thought they were just defensive, perhaps carrying some unresolved trauma from their past that needed your gentle understanding. But the part nobody tells you is that this behavior is highly calculated. When they accused you of the exact things they were actively doing, they were not confused. They were systematically offloading their overwhelming shame directly onto your shoulders. This changes everything once you truly see the mechanics of their mind. They needed your constant attention the exact same way a raging fire desperately needs oxygen to survive. Without your reactions, their completely fabricated reality begins to collapse under its own weight. They provoked you on purpose because a negative reaction still assured them that they controlled your heart. You spent countless sleepless nights trying to understand how someone who claimed to love you could be so incredibly cruel. The disturbing truth is that their version of love is simply ownership. They viewed you not as a magnificent, independent human being, but as an appliance plugged into their wall, existing strictly to provide them with endless validation and soothing comfort. This is where it gets incredibly dark but also incredibly liberating. They never truly saw you for who you are. They only saw a beautiful reflection of what they wanted to be, and then they hated you for possessing the genuine light they could only ever fake. They systematically dismantled your confidence because your quiet strength was a constant reminder of their hidden weakness. Have you ever noticed how the most explosive arguments always seem to happen on holidays, birthdays, or moments when you were finally happy? That was not a tragic coincidence. They cannot stand the thought of an emotional spotlight shining anywhere but directly on them. They sabotaged your joy because your independent happiness terrified them and made them feel entirely irrelevant. Your empathy was basically weaponized against you. When you tried to express how deeply their actions hurt you, they effortlessly flipped the script, making themselves the ultimate victim. Suddenly, you were the one apologizing for bringing up the exact pain they caused. This emotional sleight of hand kept you trapped in a perpetual state of guilt, always trying to make things right. The endless silent treatments were never about them needing space to process their complicated emotions. The sudden, freezing silence was a deliberate psychological punishment designed to make you panic. They wanted you to feel abandoned, to frantically beg for their attention, and to prove your loyalty by crawling back to them, completely willing to accept whatever terms they demanded. You were constantly walking on eggshells, desperately trying to predict the exact mood they would be in when they walked through the door. This chronic hypervigilance actually rewired your nervous system, keeping you stuck in survival mode. You were not living a normal life. You were carefully managing a highly volatile emotional hostage situation, disguised as a romantic relationship. But this profound revelation is exactly what sets you free from their invisible prison. You finally understand that no amount of perfect behavior, infinite patience, or endless love would have ever been enough to fill the massive void inside them. You cannot heal someone who actively uses your beautiful compassion as a weapon to completely destroy your peace of mind and steal your joy. You probably thought you were losing the game, convinced that their silence meant they had completely forgotten about you. You watched them move on so quickly, desperately trying to understand how you meant so little after everything you sacrificed. But here is the ultimate plot twist you never saw coming. They never actually stopped monitoring you, and they never completely let you go. You thought they won because they walked away looking completely untouched, wearing a terrifyingly calm smirk. But they actually lost the single most valuable source of authentic love they will ever encounter in this lifetime. Their sudden departure was not a glorious victory march. It was a desperate, panicked retreat because they realized your beautiful light was finally waking you up. You honestly believed you were shattered, utterly convinced that your inability to make the relationship work was a massive personal failure. The reality is that you were profoundly surviving. Your spirit was fighting back against a psychological parasite. Every time you cried, you were fundamentally grieving the beautiful illusion, slowly cleansing their toxic residue from your heavy soul. They desperately wanted you to believe that you were totally dependent on them for your happiness and survival. But the breathtaking truth is exactly the opposite. They were entirely dependent on you. You were the strong host providing all the emotional currency, the endless forgiveness, and the essential stability that allowed them to wear their fragile, completely fake mask in public. When they moved on to the new supply, you felt incredibly replaced, imagining they were finally giving someone else the love you deserved. But they simply recycled the exact same script. The new person is not getting a magically upgraded version of them. They are just receiving the deceptive love-bombing phase that you already survived, slowly walking into the exact same destructive trap. You spent so much time agonizing over whether they ever actually cared about you, hoping to find just a tiny shred of genuine human connection. The truth is much darker but also incredibly freeing. They cared about how you made them feel about themselves. You were a perfectly polished mirror reflecting back an incredibly powerful image that they desperately needed to believe was real. They systematically tried to convince you that your boundaries were cruel and that your completely valid anger was abusive. The twist is that your boundaries were the exact cure they feared the most. The moment you decided to simply say no, the entire foundation of their control began to aggressively crumble. They did not leave because you were flawed. They fled because you woke up. You thought the worst thing that could ever happen was them walking completely out of your life and leaving you totally alone. But the genuine tragedy would have been them staying and completely consuming the rest of your beautiful life. Their sudden absence, which initially felt like a devastating punishment, was actually the universe violently stepping in to save you from complete ruin. They spent years projecting their own deep insecurities onto you, making you carry the heavy baggage of their profound inadequacy. You carried it simply because you loved them. But the moment you finally set that luggage down, the immense burden instantly returns to its true owner. You are suddenly incredibly light, while they must forever carry the massive weight of their endless emptiness. You are not the tragic victim in this story, even though the intense pain completely convinced you otherwise. You are the ultimate survivor who walked through a blazing psychological fire and miraculously kept your beautiful soul totally intact. The monster did not completely consume you, it accidentally forged you into something fundamentally unbreakable and infinitely more powerful. The audience often craves emotional justice, desperately wanting to see the narcissist suffer the exact same agony they inflicted on others. But genuine justice does not look like a dramatic movie scene or a sudden lightning bolt of karmic revenge. True justice is the quiet, terrifying reality of what happens when the mask inevitably slips and they are completely alone with their own mind. Imagine living an entire lifetime completely incapable of experiencing authentic, unconditional love or genuine human intimacy. That is their absolute permanent reality. They can brilliantly mimic profound connection, but they can never actually feel the incredible warmth of truly being known and loved for who they actually are. Their emotional existence is a totally barren, freezing wasteland. As the years continue to pass, their carefully constructed false image requires more and more exhausting energy to successfully maintain. The people around them slowly start to notice the strange inconsistencies, the sudden bursts of irrational rage, and the complete lack of true empathy. The audience they so desperately rely on for survival slowly but surely begins to quietly walk away. They will constantly chase the fleeting high of brand new relationships, forever seeking that perfect source of uncritical validation. But because they inevitably destroy every single thing they touch, they are totally doomed to repeat the exact same miserable cycle forever. They will leave a long trail of broken hearts, but they will never actually outrun the massive hollow void inside. The most profound punishment they will ever experience is the total inability to ever peacefully rest. They are constantly paranoid, terrified of being completely exposed, endlessly managing multiple lies just to keep their fragile reality from completely shattering. While you are slowly learning to sleep peacefully again, they are forever trapped in a terrifying, exhausting psychological war. They thought they completely destroyed your spirit, but all they actually did was successfully burn the bridge that gave them access to your incredible light. Now they must sit in total darkness, fully aware that the very best thing that ever happened to them is forever gone. They will silently compare every single new person to the profound depth and unwavering loyalty they lost in you. The heartbreaking loneliness they inevitably face is not a result of cruel fate, it is entirely self-inflicted. By treating incredibly precious human beings like completely disposable objects, they actively guarantee their own ultimate isolation. When their superficial charms finally fade, they will find themselves surrounded only by the absolute empty echoes of their own endless manipulation. You do not ever need to seek revenge or completely expose them to the rest of the world to achieve total justice. Their own unhealed sickness is the ultimate judge, jury, and executioner. The incredible life of profound peace, genuine connection, and deep joy that you are currently building is a reality they can only ever desperately pretend to have on their carefully curated social media. Every time they successfully manipulate someone new, they secretly know that the affection they receive is entirely fake, given only to the mask they wear. They are completely haunted by the terrifying knowledge that if anyone ever truly saw the broken creature hiding underneath, they would be immediately abandoned. This profound secret shame is a prison they can literally never escape from. True justice is absolutely silent. It is the profound realization that you get to completely heal, miraculously grow, and beautifully evolve into a profoundly deeper version of yourself. Meanwhile, they are tragically frozen in time, repeating the exact same destructive behaviors, completely trapped in a tiny emotional cage of their own making. You are finally free, they are permanently stuck. Now that you finally see the completely terrifying truth of what you successfully escaped, your incredible healing journey can genuinely begin. You no longer have to endlessly analyze their confusing words or desperately try to decipher their heavily toxic actions. The absolute most powerful choice you can ever make right now is to completely redirect all that beautiful energy back into yourself. You are no longer frantically feeding the bottomless monster that completely drained your precious soul. By fiercely implementing absolute no contact or gray rocking when utterly necessary, you are actively starving the psychological parasite. Every single day you intentionally choose your own profound peace over their endless chaotic drama is a massive, glorious victory for your wounded spirit. It is completely okay to heavily mourn the beautiful future you desperately thought you were building together. Grieving the absolute illusion is a fundamentally necessary part of deeply healing your broken heart. But as you cry those heavy tears, deeply remember that you are not losing a genuine soulmate. You are finally releasing an extremely dangerous emotional predator from your precious life. The profound self-doubt that relentlessly plagued your completely exhausted mind is slowly beginning to instantly evaporate. You are miraculously learning to fiercely trust your incredible intuition once again. That quiet, deeply powerful inner voice that originally warned you something was terribly wrong is now safely guiding you back home to the absolute beautiful core of your own true identity. You survived an entirely invisible emotional war that most people could never possibly comprehend. Your profound ability to heavily endure such incredible psychological torment and still emerge with your deeply compassionate heart completely intact is incredibly staggering. You are not deeply damaged goods. You are an absolute breathtaking warrior who successfully defeated a relentless nightmare. The massive emotional void they intentionally tried to permanently install inside you is entirely capable of being beautifully filled with your own profound self-love. You get to completely rediscover all the amazing passions, deep friendships, and incredible hobbies you had to violently suppress just to keep them happy. Your beautifully reclaimed life is suddenly opening up in spectacular ways. Every completely healthy boundary you fiercely establish absolutely terrifies the toxic people hiding in the dark, but it heavily acts as a beautiful beacon of glorious light to genuinely safe, profoundly loving souls. You are powerfully rewriting the entire tragic script of your whole life. The incredibly painful chapter of severe emotional abuse is now permanently and completely closed forever. You will absolutely have difficult days where the heavy trauma bonds desperately try to frantically pull you entirely backward into the deep darkness. But you completely know way too much now to ever be successfully tricked again. The deeply heavy fog has completely lifted, and you can clearly see the incredibly bright, profoundly beautiful path stretching magnificently right out in front of you. The incredible depth of your profound emotional capacity, which they constantly tried to maliciously use as a totally fatal weakness, is actually your absolute greatest superpower. It is the deeply magical thing that will eventually allow you to completely connect with incredibly genuine people, beautifully build a massively meaningful life, and fully experience absolutely real, unconditional love. You finally realize that your true worth was absolutely never connected to their broken inability to unconditionally love you. They spent years desperately trying to aggressively become your entire psychological center, but in the glorious end, they only taught you how to become your own. The absolute greatest punishment for a narcissist is watching the person they tried to break finally become fundamentally impossible to control.